Ralph Lauren, he forgot to trademark Ralph Lauren and Polo Ralph Lauren in Indonesia, which I guess he thought was, who cares about that country? So in Indonesia, where my wife is from, you'll have thousands of Polo Ralph Lauren stores, but it's not his stores. You'll find them at the ferry terminals. You'll find them at the oddest and weirdest places, and they're like cloned, perfect copies, right? You buy one, they don't keep the shape as the real deal for sure. But it's interesting. And they were trying to work with the Indonesian government to kind of go around this. But the guy who trademarked this was probably an Indonesian fellow or lady who had studied in the US, had discovered this brand, and gone back to Indonesia after studied and just trademarked it out of it.
What inspired you to create My Pet Go?
I guess a combination of being a pet parent. So my dog, Caesar, a 10-year-old Maltese. When I started this, he was, I guess, about 6. But also the fact that I'm an opportunistic entrepreneur that kind of looks at gaps in the market, and I could see that the pet sector, broadly speaking, is until today very analog, and so how does one digitally transform it? And I've done a lot of that in my life in other industries before, and sort of looked at this and looked at the macro and said, the numbers look quite interesting. I think millennials at the time, but certainly today Gen Z is sort of becoming the largest pet parent group, and they are very data driven, do most of their chores on their mobile phone. So it kind of makes sense to try to consolidate all your pet chores into the mobile phone with a data driven approach, where you add sort of nuevo technology, frontier technology like AI and things around that. Yeah.
Well, what is My Pet Go? What is the service, or what is the product that you offer?
Yeah, so it's like a Whoop strap for your dog, right? So we're a canine only offering at the moment. We don't have a feline offering or a cat offering. It is in the works for 2026, but we're trying to sort of perfect the dogs before we kind of jump over to a different animal. And the idea is essentially to report on the same stuff that you would get from your health wearable as a human. The difference, though, is pets do not tend to talk. And so we're trying to kind of give them a voice through the data and through explaining what these health markers means and what you can do about when something goes out of range. So we look at HRV, which is not commonly used in the world of pets, right? Or dogs, I should say. We understand that marker as a human because that's what we get from whatever Aura Ring or Whoop strap or Apple Watch, or the original gangster was, of course, Fitbit. And so we understand that we look at step count, behavior traits. We look at other health markers like respiration rate, which is obviously breathing. We look at temperature, whether it's high or low, which could, obviously be an indication of hyperthermia or something that could potentially lead to heat stroke. So we look at that and a bunch of the different markers. But I think, the one thing that we do quite differently is we explain this in a layman way, and then we sort of say, here's what you can do with this data and this insights, and here is someone who can help you. That's where we bridge that contact to a service provider or a physical product. So it's kind of an ecosystem play, platform play. Yeah.
In terms of, I've got some hair, right? But I've had no issues. Sure. Did you have to overcome some technical hurdles actually getting the sensors to go through hair to be able to get the right metrics?
Yeah. So, what you're using there, I guess that was a Fitbit or an Apple Watch.
Watch. Yeah. Right.
Apple Watch. Here you go. So if you kind of look underneath, you have like the green light, right? So that emits green light. It looks at how the blood is flowing under your skin. Okay. And you're right, unless you're like super hairy, it tends to work quite well. We use different sensors and we use a different science, right? So the science that, Whoop or your Apple Watch would use is PPG, right? We use something called BCG, which is ballistocardiography. And so it looks at how the blood mass is shifting in the body. And we use different types of sensor for this, right? We can't emit light because we're dealing with the fur. So we got to look at we use a gyroscope and an accelerometer, and so there is other data points we extrapolate. We then put these data points into AI models, and we then try to mimic what a heartbeat kind of looks like, and then we
Whoa,
report on that. Yeah.
that's cool. So is that a
Yeah.
new type of sensing? A new sensor?
Well, I mean, it's old sensors, but I guess the AI models are new, right? So it's
Okay,
like
sure.
we're a data business. We're not really a hardware company. We're a data business. We try to make sense of data. We try to report that data in a simplistic, understandable way, and then kind of help you make sense of what this data means and what it can do for you and your pet, and how it can kind of help you to mitigate something going kind of in the wrong direction. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, we have a number of clients that are not necessarily in this exact technology area, but that want to do this concept of gathering data and using it. How did you go about that? I think in terms of getting it out there. To get data, you have to have users and sensors on animals, right? Maybe not.
Yeah,
How did you gather data?
you can have plenty of users, but if you want to kind of get the markers right, we're dealing with like 200 odd dog breeds, right? And then we're
Sure.
dealing with uh, males, females, healthy, unhealthy, young, old. And so when you start looking at all the data points between that, you're looking at far more than 200 types, right? And so what you need to do is you need to essentially have a mixture of, and then I'm mentioning pure breeds. You're not talking about the cross breeds here. It becomes more challenging. But essentially, what you need to do is you need to take the wearables, test it on tons of different breeds and ages and health conditions, and then kind of validate the data output with medical equipment, and then with a stethoscope, which is the old fashioned kind of veterinary listening and kind of doing it the old fashioned way, and then kind of calibrate backwards, right? But the science we use is, as I said, BCG. It's a lot of work. We've been building this for the past 4 years. We're kind of like gone to market, and we're a B2B proposition. So we tend to work with other pet tech or pet related companies that have a big existing base of users. And then we white label everything from the application, where we built this longevity program where we give like daily tasks. Here's what you should do across, activity, which is sort of mobility and rest. And then we have like health and nutrition. And then we got like preventative care and health screenings, right? And if you do all these things in a timely manner, you will have a happier, a healthier, and a longer living dog, right? And that's kind of what the mission and vision is here. It's really to kind of help you understand your pet better, but also to get your pet to kind of live with you a longer and healthier and better life.
As you're kind of maybe on the earlier side of this 4 years, when did it sort of dawn on you that maybe this is something worth protecting, and how did you go about it?
Yeah, I mean, we have a bunch of trademarks, and because we're a global business, it's kind of like, do you go nuts on your trademarks, or do you kind of focus on certain territories? And we haven't gone like super nuts on it, but I think we will. I've spent a lot of time in Asia Pacific, and in particular in Southeast Asia, and Ralph Lauren, he forgot to trademark Ralph Lauren and Polo Ralph Lauren in Indonesia, which I guess he thought was, who cares about that country? So in Indonesia, where my wife is from, you'll have thousands of Polo Ralph Lauren stores, but it's not his stores. Like, I mean, you'll find them at the ferry terminals. You'll find them at the oddest and weirdest places, and they're like cloned, perfect copies, right? I mean, you buy one, you wash them one time, they're they don't keep the shape as the real deal, for sure. But it's interesting. And in my previous life, I was in media, and Ralph Lauren was one of my advertisers, and they advertised with me in Hong Kong and in Singapore. But in Indonesia, they were, and so I knew them fairly well, and they were trying to work with the Indonesian government to kind of go around this. But the guy who trademarked this was probably an Indonesian fellow or lady who had studied in the US, had discovered this brand, and gone back to Indonesia after studied and just trademarked the shit out of it, like every combination, everything, and owned everything. So there was nothing that the Indonesian government could do, and they tried the hardest. So in our case, sort of segue back, we haven't patented anything. We've trademarked the name My Pet Go because we think logo types come and go, and it's not, so, but the name we've trademarked. Merck in the US, they own My Pet, which was the original name we actually wanted. And when I saw that Merck had that, I thought, okay. And at the time, they didn't make use of it, but they owned the domain, and they had that. In terms of patents, we've decided not to do anything with Gen 1 because we knew that whatever we build for Gen 1 is going to be vastly improved for Gen 2. So we probably will look at a combination of hardware where we're actually building like the Whoop, we're building like our own components. So we're not going to rely on third party. So the way we build it, it's going to be patented. We're also going to patent the algorithms, which is hard if you base it on a science, because you can't patent the science, but we can patent the way that we leverage the science and how the algos actually work. So we will certainly do that. I think, if you want to be like Musk and open source everything, you can do that. But I think, we'll protect some of the stuff. Yeah.
Any copycats that have come up?
I've seen many companies, because I do speak at a lot of like pet conferences, and there are a couple of big ones, right, in Europe and US and Asia, and I kind of tend to go to all of them. So I do know people in the space fairly well, and I know all the large players, the Mars and the Purina Nestle's, and so there are a lot of so-called wearables that are 2.0 wearables that are now using AI models, and they're looking at longevity, and it kind of sounds very familiar. And I don't know where they got all that from, but one can guess. So it's a free market. So I think it grows the category to have others. Like, if you look at pet wearables, it's nowhere near its fullest potential. It's nowhere near where human wearables are, right? Like we're like, most people don't even know it exists. They know maybe about GPS trackers, but health and longevity is kind of a completely, entirely new sort of subcategory, which I think we're early in that. But yeah, we've seen concepts that are about to launch. They seldom launch, but they say they're going to be able to do everything, and they have the ecosystem play, and they do this and they do that, but then they seldom come to market. It's very hard to deal with hardware, everything from manufacturing.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, this, what you're doing is a big lift, because you got software, you got hardware, you got sales. Yeah. I mean, distribution, manufacturing. It's not just something that a hobbyist could pick up over a course of a month and make it happen for themselves.
Yeah, right.
Sophisticated group of individuals to put something like this together to copy you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a high entry barrier. If like somebody wants to come in and compete, you need to be like a complete full stack individual who knows everything across technology, because it's algorithms, it's AI, it's hardware, it's firmware, it's middleware, right, and software. And so you need to be able to do all of that, and you need to be able to do it well, and like nobody can do that. So you're going to have to hire quite a few experts, and then you're talking about sales channels and distribution and biz dev and all these other things. Like that's a whole different ball game there.
Let's take a little bit of time there. So let's talk about how you got funded, or if you were self-funded. How did you get started with that initial, maybe first round, and began to circulate that?
Yeah, I'm the main investor. Yes. So built some stuff in my past life, and some not so successful and some quite successfully, and managed to sell it off to a big German media and tech conglomerate. And some of the proceeds from that kind of venture was reinvested into this new venture and idea. And that's kind of how it started. And then, when you are self-invested to a large degree, both money and time and blood, sweat, and tears, you tend to be able to convince others to also put in money, because you do have so much skin in the game, and they know that, you're not going to kind of throw in the towel that early. And so yeah, I mean, I have some professional investors, and I have some, what you would refer to as angel or private investors, fairly sophisticated folks that have come in, and now we're looking at creating this larger group where we're honing in on AI and longevity as two kind of very important areas that we want to focus on, but kind of acquiring and building and investing into things that are synergistic, that can be built in and kind of assembled together. Think of it as Lego bricks that can be put together, and then we go and package this up to B2B partners as a B2B proposition. And they have different wants and needs, but when you have these different Lego bricks, they can kind of pick and choose, and you put it together and you enable them and give them these new frontier technologies. And that's what we've done. And I think that's really quite unique, that B2B proposition, where these type of companies tends to be direct to consumer most often.
I was going to ask about that, Richard. Why did you decide to go B2B as opposed to B2C?
So I think the direct to consumer route is very expensive. So you have a high customer acquisition cost, and then you tend to unfortunately have a high churn rate. So you're spending a lot for a customer that's going to come in, and then the customer leaves you quite quickly. And these businesses tend to be driven by an underlying model of a SaaS kind of fee, a subscription fee. So
Sure.
What you get from the wearable might cover, it might not even cover your overhead, like for manufacturing, like your COGS. It may cover, but it won't cover the COGS plus marketing, which is your customer acquisition cost per se. And so we sort of said, why don't we go to the big guys that already have all the pet owners, and they have a relationship with them, and there is a trust there, and they've spent hard-earned cash into building that audience. And then we do a meaningful deal with them where we really provide value to them and their users, and on a revenue share basis, and so on and so forth. And so that was always our prerogative with like, how do we go by marketing, and how do we go by building this? So I guess by next year we will be powering probably 10 million freemium users, and I don't know how many premium. So freemium would be they run on our app. They don't yet have a wearable, but they get a lot of the other kind of features that we have there. And then a chunk of them will then become sort of premium and get the wearable as well. And like all the health markers and things that comes with actually the wearable. Yeah.
It's a lot of users.
Yeah, it's a lot of users. It's a lot of data. Yeah. And the model there would be, we charge a very small fee to kind of maintain the app and enable it. And I mean, it's a state-of-the-art application with like everything from scheduling to journaling to whatever concerns your pet's life. Like you can go completely nerd, and like whatever you feed, whatever whatever you do, you can put in there. Or you can choose to use whatever you think is helpful to you, like schedule reminders for dental scaling, or your upcoming kind of nose to tail checkup and whatnot. Like it's really up to you. So we don't dictate that.
We just got a pet this year, Cal. He's a doodle. He's awesome. And one of the things I've noticed is the insurance, right? When you get insurance and then you go get the chip put in. I mean, it seems like you need to something
the microchip.
Right. It seems like a great opportunity, perhaps, to, hey, why just do that, like you said, freemium, maybe integrate with insurance or the vets or the breeders. I'm sure you've thought about some of that as a way to enter the market. But that's interesting. Very, very cool. I think people would want to at least have access to it, or have the opportunity later to upgrade, kind of like you're saying, down the road.